In 1532, Benvenuto Cellini, goldsmith to the Pope, watched a necromancer summon demons in the Colosseum. The necromancer, a Sicilian priest, stood at the center of the arena and traced a circle in the earth. He read a Latin incantation and cast perfume onto a blazing fire. Then, Cellini claims, the ruins were filled with countless demons who whirled around them in clouds. With some difficulty, the necromancer managed to dismiss all the demons but two, who followed Cellini back to his house, leaping from rooftop to rooftop overhead. The Colosseum Cellini knew was a gutted ruin. All the seats were gone, half the outer wall had collapsed, and huge heaps of fallen stone choked the arches. The only sign of life was a small chapel at the east end of the arena, where Passion plays were performed on Good Friday. The vaults and passageways, however, were filled with the debris of earlier centuries, when the Colosseum had been a palace, a castle, a bullring, a den of thieves, and a bustling neighborhood. With 76 public entrances, an estimated 45,000 seats, water fountains, lavatories, a system of awnings, and an astonishing network of subterranean chambers and lifts, the Colosseum, completed in 80 AD, was the largest and most sophisticated Roman amphitheater ever built. The last gladiators fought in the Colosseum sometime during the early 5th century. According to a later legend, the combats ended after a monk named Telemachus leapt down to the arena and tried to prevent a gladiator from killing his opponent. In reality, it was probably a combination of rising costs and Christian disapproval that brought the combats to a close. Beast hunts continued for another century, outlasting the Western Roman Empire itself. By the year 523, when the last recorded hunt was held, the Colosseum was already decaying. A series of earthquakes had made part of the upper tiers unstable. Debris clogged the sewers, leaving the labyrinth under the arena so prone to flooding that it had to be filled in. Over the following decades, as the long agony of the Gothic Wars ravaged Italy, Rome's population collapsed. There had once been enough Romans to fill the Colosseum 20 times over. Now, the entire city could fit in the front rows. In these diminished circumstances, the Colosseum was obsolete. Within a few centuries, even its function was forgotten. Some claimed that the amphitheater had been a temple of the sun, crowned by a vast golden dome. Others thought that it was a temple dedicated to all the gods, with a gigantic statue of Jupiter or Apollo in the arena. The strangest legends revolved around the poet Virgil, who was said to have built the Colosseum with the help of demons and used it as a theater for sorcery. At first, the Colosseum was boarded up, with fences in the arcades to prevent entry, but within a few decades of the Gothic Wars, squatters were living inside. The cavernous corridors were drier and better constructed than most of the era's houses, and roomy enough to accommodate hundreds of people and animals. Storage lofts, stables, and a chapel were built into the vaults, and busy roads ran across the packed rubble of the arena. Most of the Colosseum's new inhabitants were involved in the lucrative business of recycling the building's stone. The outer walls were made of the fine limestone known as travertine, and the seats were marble. Besides being easy and attractive to reuse, both marble and travertine could be burned in kilns to make lime for mortar. The pillaging of the Colosseum began even before the final games were staged in the arena, when King Theodoric authorized the demolition of the most decayed parts. By the 9th century, the building was being mined on an industrial scale, with tunnels driven through the massive concrete foundations to harvest the travertine blocks of the hypogeum. The settlement inside the Colosseum, concentrated in areas that were not being dismantled, grew steadily. By the 11th century, 2-story houses lined the arena. A contemporary document describes one of these as a structure of brick and wood, with marble front steps, a garden on one side, and an apple orchard behind. This house, along with all the others in the Colosseum, was destroyed during the Norman sack of 1084. Soon after, the aristocratic Frangipane family made the amphitheater part of their vast castle. An imposing two-story palace rose on the east side, and knights issued from the gates to battle rival clans or attack the Pope in the Lateran. In 1332, after the Frangipani had been evicted from their stronghold, a bullfight was held in the Colosseum to welcome the Holy Roman Emperor Ludwig of Bavaria. Otherwise, the building seems to have been largely abandoned. It became notorious as a nest of bandits. 19th century excavators found the bones of murder victims hidden in the arcades. We'll continue our story into the Renaissance after a brief word about this video's sponsor. Peregrine Pendants crafts jewelry from ancient coins, like this denarius of Julia Domna. All coins are purchased from reputable dealers and are guaranteed authentic, whether Roman, Greek, or more recent. Joost van Rossum, the owner, has perfected the technique of setting ancient coins, like this magnificent Aureus of Nero, without damaging them in any way. You can see how he does this on his YouTube channel, which is linked on screen. I had two of my own denarii, not, unfortunately, issued by Caesar, like this one, set into a silver necklace and bracelet for my fiancée. Whether you're interested in Marcus Aurelius, featured on that last coin, or in coins from any historical period or place, all you have to do to start your order is visit the Peregrine Pendants website or email info@peregrinependants.com. Use the code TOLDENSTONE for 15% off any purchase. Returning to our topic. The south side of the Colosseum, built over waterlogged sediment, had always been susceptible to seismic damage. In 1349, one of the worst earthquakes in Rome's history caused the entire south perimeter wall to collapse. The gigantic heap of rubble, known as the coxa, the juicy thigh, would be mined for the next 4 centuries. In 1452, a single busy contractor carried off more than 2,500 cartloads of stone. Blocks from the Colosseum were incorporated into the Palazzo Farnese, the Palazzo Barberini, the Basilica of Sant'Agostino, the Ponte Sisto over the Tiber, and many other structures. Even the balcony in the facade of St. Peter's Basilica, from which the Pope gives his Urbi et Orbi blessing, was fashioned from Colosseum travertine. The amphitheater was saved from complete destruction by the fact that it was jointly owned from the 14th century onward by a local religious order, the City of Rome, and the popes. Although all three profited from the sale of stone, none could authorize wholesale demolition. The popes took the leading role in the Colosseum's management. They were not always sympathetic stewards. Pius V proposed demolishing the building for its pagan associations. Sixtus V attempted to install a wool mill inside, and a later pontiff allowed manure to be dumped under the arcades. In general, however, the popes tried to limit pillaging, authorizing only the reuse of stone that had already fallen from the walls. They seem to have been especially concerned with maintaining the north side of the Colosseum, which formed a monumental backdrop for papal processions between the Lateran Palace and the Vatican. Gradually, the Colosseum came to be regarded as a Christian monument. The little church of Santa Maria della Pietà was built beside the arena and became famous as the home of a hermit who supported himself by selling the grass that grew among the ruins. Pope Clement X commissioned Bernini to design a grand Baroque church that would have filled the interior of the Colosseum. Although this was never built, a crucifix was erected in the center of the arena, and stations of the cross were set up around the perimeter. By this time, the Colosseum had become a tourist destination. Goethe visited by moonlight in 1786 and was astonished by the scale of the building. Lord Byron devoted several stanzas of Childe Harold's Pilgrimage to the amphitheater. Artists sold paintings of the overgrown ruins to visitors. Efforts to excavate and stabilize the building began in the early 19th century. Since then, with the exception of a brief period during World War II, when it served as a weapons depository for German paratroopers, the Colosseum has been what it is today, the most famous and most visited of all ancient ruins, and the definitive symbol of Roman grandeur and decadence. My new book, Insane Emperors, Sunken Cities, and Earthquake Machines, is now available as a paperback, ebook, and audiobook. You can buy your copy through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or your local bookstore. For more Told in Stone content, check out my channels, Told in Stone Footnotes, and Scenic Routes to the Past, which are linked in the description. Please consider joining other viewers in supporting Told in Stone on Patreon. Thanks for watching.